All right. Thank you all for being here. In April, on the 18th, for tonight's school board meeting, I want the record to reflect that all school board members are in attendance except for Mr. Bauer. We also have Dr. Griffin and Ms. Beeman here with us this evening. I'd like to ask Dr. Calderon to please lead us in the invocation and pledge.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. This evening, I'd like to share some thoughts on leadership from John Maxwell's book, The Maxwell Daily Reader. During the term of President Ronald Reagan, leaders of 7 industrial nations were meeting at the White House to discuss economic policy. During the meeting, Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau strongly upbraided British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, telling her that she was all wrong and that her policies wouldn't work. She stood there in front of him with her head up, listening until he was finished. Then she walked away. Reagan went up to her and said, "Maggie, he should never have spoken to you like that. He was out of line, just entirely out of line. Why did you let him get away with that?" Thatcher looked at Reagan and answered, "A woman must know when a man is being simply childish." The story surely typifies Margaret Thatcher. She appeared to have no doubts about herself or her beliefs, and she was absolutely secure in her leadership as a result. That is the case for all good leaders, and I'm honored to be looking at many of them right now. Secure leaders are able to believe in others because they believe in themselves. They aren't arrogant. They know their own strengths and weaknesses and respect themselves. When their people perform well, they don't feel threatened. They go out of their way to bring the best people together and then build them up so that they will perform at the highest level. And when a secure leader's team succeeds, it brings him or her great joy. He sees that, or she sees that, as the highest compliment they can receive. On behalf of this entire school board, I have to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts to all of our leaders here in Seminole County Public Schools. We are honored to serve with you day in and day out. We know you always have tough decisions to make, but at the end of the day, we always make the right decision for all children, and for that, I am indebted to your leadership, so thank you. If you'd all please rise with me for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Calderon. Tonight we have joining us Katie Murphy, representing the Seminole County Council of PTA. We appreciate you being here, Katie. Dr. Griffin, do you have any agenda modifications?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. The addendum for good cause is marked on our electronic agenda by a green flag named addendum item. And also, I'm requesting that we move action item 2H from the consent agenda and move it to separate consideration.
Thank you. School board members, do you have any agenda modifications? Dr. Calderon?
No modifications, but I do have comment on H as well.
Okay. Member Almond?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Mrs. Sanchez?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. I will be pulling 2B for separate consideration as well. That's an appointment to serve on an RFP.
And what about the financial advisors on 2G?
That is under new business.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
we'll be good with that. All right. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda outline?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
My recommendation is that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. All right. We're going to move on to 2B, which is the item for the RFP appointing a school board member to serve, an RFQ for a school board member. My apologies. N, not B. Do we need to modify the agenda again? All right. So
Gonna
So
pull
who made
Ann.
the motion?
Ms. Almond.
did.
Okay. So, Ms. Beeman, would you walk us through the best way to modify?
Superintendent, if you would recommend that the agenda be modified to reflect what is actually on the agenda, and then we will have a motion.
2N instead of 2B.
So my recommendation will be to
Approve the consent agenda.
approve the consent agenda as presented with discussion for item N.
So moved.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, so 2N is the RFQ for Pinecrest Elementary School renovations. And if there's a board member that would like to serve on that committee, I would like to do that. Dr. Calderon, I know it's in your district, but I don't know what else you have going on.
I'd be more than happy to.
Okay, all right. Well then, if we have a motion for Dr. Calderon to serve on that RFQ?
So moved. But you're appointing, right?
Well, how did we leave that the last time, though? That there was going to be consensus from the board to appoint someone?
Correct. There was discussion at the last school board meeting that the chairman would bring forth a discussion about whether or not a particular member would want to be on the committee, and then from there, the chairman could appoint.
Okay,
The policy that is revising that process is in process.
got it. All right, thank you. All right, then let the record reflect that I'll be appointing Dr. Calderon to serve on that RFQ. Okay. Dr. Griffin. Well, it wasn't then for consideration because I made it as an appointment, so it wasn't to vote on, so I really didn't have to pull it for consideration.
So then we just have to go back, and my recommendation is that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Third time's a charm. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right.
Now we're good.
Okay. Dr. Griffin, you pulled 2H.
Yes, Madam Chair, there is one item under separate consideration today, and I want to emphasize that if there is any public comment related to 2H, the middle school world history and civics instructional material item, please make sure you have handed in your speaker's form to the clerk.
All right. At this point, I have no public comment forms turned in, so we'll go ahead and have the presentation.
One back there.
If there's anyone in the audience that has public comment that they would like to make tonight, we need to turn in those forms to the clerk. All right, so board members, we'll take a motion and a second on this item for discussion and presentation.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Griffin. Like,
We'll allow public.
is this the only public comment on this item this evening? Is there anyone else that has public comment? All right, Mr. Kornman, while you make your way back up here, we'll have Dr. Calderon read our statement on public input. If you would like to speak regarding this item. If you have comment for the board, you need to come to the podium and share that with us on the microphone. So,
Good evening. The public input segment of the meeting is provided to allow the public to present specific matters to the school board for its consideration and referral to the superintendent and staff for inquiry and action. It is not the intent of the school board to deprive any person of his or her right of freedom of expression. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes and must clearly identify the matter to be addressed. Identify yourself along with your address. The school board is very pleased that you've taken the time to come to this meeting and that you're willing to make your views known or speak to issues before the school board for action. Thank you for being here this evening.
Hi, my name is Alan Kornman. I reside at 581 Willingham Road in Chuliota, Florida, and I want to thank Dr. Griffin and Amy and the board for allowing me to speak tonight regarding the world history book that is up for adoption today. And my comments, I guess, I was confused at the beginning. It seems the book is up for consideration rather than consent. Now, is the book going to be adopted today, or is it going to be postponed?
I will be making a recommendation to the board after your public comment.
Okay. Well, I recommend that the world history book not be adopted tonight for 3 reasons. Number one is that the ancillary material, the workbook, is still in committee, the review committee, which we were told does not exist, but it does exist and is still, according to Sean, is still active. And they are still in the review process, if our information is correct, regarding the ancillary workbook material. Is that true or false?
I think there will be a presentation later on where we can certainly ask those questions, but this is an opportunity for you to share with us your concerns.
Okay. Well, in the world history book, we believe in equitable content for the students. Within this world history book, there is not equitable content. The book covers the major religions going up into the 1000 plus AD, but there is no mention of the Islamic culture anywhere in the book, which is quite odd because the Islamic culture did have quite an impact on the time periods that are being taught to the students. The lessons that the students will learn from the 6th grade on will guide them and help them as they make sense of the world around them and current events. And when you're in the 6th grade, you do become aware of this, so it's very important that that be covered within the book. So oddly enough, the entire Islamic culture has been omitted. I find it incredible that this book could go through the review process and that not come up. Now, we have been told, we've had many discussions with folks on the school board, they've been very open to us and talking with us. The response that we've gotten is that, well, that's going to be made up in the 10th grade book. And in the 10th grade book, the equitable issue of content still comes up. There's 32 pages on Islam, 1 to 2 pages on the other faith. But that's anecdotal right now, because what's at stake right now is, or discussion, is this world history book. The other objections that we've heard is that it doesn't follow the standards. Well, the standards...
Mr. Kornman, if you can just wrap it up because you have run out of time.
Okay. Real quickly, the standards are very broad, use timelines to identify chronological order of historical events. Extremely broad. This book, as written, does not follow those guidelines, and for those 2 reasons, not without time to get to the third, for those 2 reasons, we recommend that this be put on hold until these important issues can be addressed for equitable content for our students.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate your input very much.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Harold.
Good evening, school board members. Good evening, Dr. Griffin. Just to give you a little bit of information about the process for our textbook adoption for middle school world history and middle school civics, I just wanted to provide some information, and I apologize. Some of this will be a little bit tedious as I kind of go through line by line, but I want to make sure that we are all very clear as to how things have progressed. As you'll see in the timeline that is presented here, on July 13th, we did receive a draft bid from the Florida Department of Education of what they thought would be the eligible textbooks for adoption. There were 5 world history texts and 3 civics texts that were eligible for consideration. Our committees did consider all 5 of the world history and all 3 of the civics texts. In December of 2016, through survey, we did determine in working with teachers which courses were most in need of revised texts, which led us to the decision to form the recommendation committees for grades 6 and 7. On July 31st, the final bid from the Florida Department of Education came out. Then on February 16th, we did advertise a parent preview night. It was for parents and educators, administrators, anybody who wanted to talk with publishers. And we provided those as flyers to the schools, and then we also provided those in the public notice book out front. On February the 17th, where am I skipping? There we are. Oh, I'm looking at your screen and not mine. On February the 17th, we opened the previews at the schools, and so all of the schools had their materials on site by that time. February 21st, we had that parent preview night over at the SCPS Annex over off of Airport Boulevard. On March the 6th, we closed those previews at the school. At that point, all of the world history and civics teachers at those schools had an opportunity to fill out forms and provide feedback for the individuals that were representing their schools on the committee. On March the 7th, we convened both the world history and the civics committees, and I'll show you in just a few minutes kind of what their days looked like. And then on March the 9th, we made the committee came to a recommendation for the civics book, and on March the 10th, they came to a recommendation for the world history book. On March the 10th, we did post the student editions onto the Instructional Materials District Adoption website so that anyone can review the student materials. We post the student materials because the teacher's editions oftentimes have the assessment items in them, and because those are going to be part of our curriculum, should the board opt to adopt this text, then we want to make sure that we keep those items secure. On March the 15th, we did a presentation to the superintendent's leadership team, the cabinet, just to present what the committee would be recommending to the board so that they could also review those materials. And then we arrive at tonight. We are here at this board meeting this evening. From this point forward, we will have, when we have objections, we know we have some objections that we'll be presenting tonight, then we will be scheduling a public hearing, noticing the individuals that have submitted objections, and then upon completion of the hearing, then we will either continue forward with the adoption or the board has the option to make another recommendation. Promise that's the longest slide. On March the 7th, you can see that we start with vendor presentations. The vendors come in, they're given a very strict amount of time and very strict content as to what they are and are not allowed to present. They are only allowed to present material from the core curriculum. It is not the ancillary materials. It is the core curriculum and the digital resources. So things like workbooks and those sorts of things are not reviewed by the committee, and they are not part of the vendor presentations. March the 7th, because the world history had additional textbooks, they continued with vendor presentations, and then both of the groups did some first impressions, some comments between the groups, and then looked over just the design features. How does the book function for students with exceptional student or in need of exceptional services, gifted students, ELL students? How do all of those students benefit from the structure of the text? On March the 8th in the afternoon, we did a benchmark comparison, and I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like in just a second. And then on March the 9th, the Civics Committee returned to their school in the morning and said, all right, we've kind of narrowed it down to a couple. I want to get you guys into, give us your last impressions. And then returned to that committee in the afternoon for their final recommendation. On the 9th, the World History Committee did their digital materials review in the morning and then returned to their schools in the afternoon for school feedback. And then on March the 10th, they returned to review the feedback that they had received and make their final recommendation. According to our textbook adoption policy, the review committee is charged with these things, and I know I don't like it when people read me in a presentation, but for the good of the group, I will go through this line by line. They're responsible for reviewing the comments solicited from their school-based personnel, so making sure that not just the people that are at that table have a voice, but also all of their teachers that they represent at their school sites. Make sure that they review comments from the state instructional materials committees as to what are the item what are the specifications that were required for the texts that were approved on the approved list. They recommend for adoption only instructional materials that are consistent with district goals and objectives and current state standards. So for world history, they considered the 111 benchmarks that are addressed in world history. Certainly they go through certain ones specifically to make sure that they understand a few of the standards and then take opportunities to give an additional look to some of the other standards. And then in civics, there were 96 benchmarks to be addressed. Only those standards that are included within the respective courses are considered throughout the review process. Oftentimes, because these are national publishers, there is content that is outside of our content limits, and our teachers opt not to use because it is not part of our state standards. And then finally, they are to recommend the most cost-effective and educationally sound plan based on their expertise. So you can see here's a benchmark analysis. This is one world history benchmark. You can see identify key figures and basic beliefs of the Israelites and determine how these beliefs compared with those of others in the geographic area. The committee believed that the following items were pros. It had all of the key figures and covered monotheism. The teacher's edition was easily accessible with support activities for diverse learners. It had great visuals, strong discussion topics in the activities so that it wasn't just relying on what's in the textbook to teach the content, that the teachers are really going to have dialogue with students. Supports cooperative learning, which we believe in heavily here in Seminole County. And then there were strong maps and graphics to support all of the text. One of the cons was that the information, when it compared monotheism with polytheism, was that it was limited in the comparison in the information. And so we know as we develop our instructional plans that that's an area that we'll also have to add some additional support for. The committee members, there were between the World History Committee and the Civics Committee, there was representation from every one of our 12 middle schools, as well as one community member who served on each committee, and one school-based administrator who also served on each committee. The school-based administrators are non-voting members. They are there only to kind of provide that administrative perspective and help the teachers to, these are social studies people who appreciate good civil discourse, and so to kind of help move things along. And then also our civics committee here, you can see based on the certifications of all of the individuals that were on these committees, they all have their social sciences certifications, and many have additional certifications as well. So they are certainly experts in their field. Upon completion of the recommendation, we did post the following information, the information you see here on the district website that allowed for parents and community members to see what was being recommended. Each of these is a hyperlink that allows access to the student edition, and then parents or community members can review from there. I had heard a comment or two that maybe some individuals were having a challenge to find that information. I just wanted to make sure we were trying to put information out there as much as we can. So I did a Google search for Seminole County instructional materials. The first 3 items that come up are related to the district adoption, and we'll take you to the instructional materials site where you can get access to those materials. And so at this time, I know Dr. Cody has some information to present regarding the objections.
Thank you, Mr. Guard-Harold. Dr. Griffin and board members, Mr. Guard-Harold has received 3 objection to instructional and/or media material forms. Question 3 on that form requires the following. To what in the material do you object? Please be specific. Cite pages, film sequence, etc. One of the forms submitted reflects content missing on the destruction of North Africa by Islam. A second form reflects, in violation of benchmark social studies SS.6.W.11, Islam was omitted from the textbook. And the third form reflects, there is no Islamic civilization chapter. We wanted to make you aware that we've received those forms.
Board members, if I might, I would like to bring to your attention that there's not a need to delay the vote on this issue, on this action item tonight. Your policy at 4.36 does provide for a process for objections for adopted materials. So the school board adopted materials. There's a process already outlined in your policy to address that. And within the policy, it states that we will, when we receive those objections to the board adopted materials, within the required time frame, have a public hearing. And the public hearing will address those individuals that have submitted the timely objections, and we do have to have a window there of 30 days to allow for additional objections, and then have the public hearing thereafter. And then once the school board addresses the objections at a public hearing, that decision is final, and only then will any monies be spent towards the approved adopted materials. That process obviously tracks the statute, which requires and provides for the process. And if this board does move toward a vote tonight on this issue and approves the superintendent's recommendation, we would invoke that process.
Thank you, Ms. Beeman. Board members, before I read my recommendation, I just want you to know that I've had a number of communications spanning from about April 4th through to the present time with a few concerned citizens regarding the recommended middle school world history book, including our process and all the parts that go with textbook adoption. I know the chairman has also received a number of communications, which she provided to me so I could see the citizens' concerns. Just want you to be aware of that before I read my recommendation. At this time, my recommendation on 2H is that the school board of Seminole County adopt the MJ World History and MJ Civics instructional materials as recommended by the Social Studies Adoption Committee.
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second. At this point, I think if there's any discussion or any questions that we have for staff, and Dr. Calderon, if you would like to start, tonight you're up first.
Sure. I just wanted to have further clarification. I know from my days in the classroom, there's no panacea of a textbook. Teachers bring in additional materials, but I want to make it perfectly clear that here within Seminole County Public Schools, at least within our teaching and learning and under Dr. Cody, your leadership, we do create instructional plans that fill in the gaps. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is no textbook that meets every single standard. So as we go through each textbook, you saw the strengths and the weaknesses. And if there is a standard that is not adequately covered, that becomes part of the supplementary materials that we provide to our teachers.
And I know subjects such as civics and world history are a little bit different than, let's say, an Algebra 1 textbook, because Algebra 1 doesn't change through the years. And obviously there's more emotion with those kind of subject matters. And just food for thought, and if staff wanted to discuss it in the future, when we do create these committees, I know it's open for the public to come into. I know I've been invited many years to serve on these committees, but we might want to consider inviting some additional subject matter experts. I know our teachers are subject matter experts, but let's say if we're doing an engineering textbook, maybe we get some people that are gainfully employed in engineering to come in. Or, you know, here with history, we sit very close to the second largest university in the country that I know that they might have some researchers that have delved into some of these topics a lot deeper than perhaps some of our staff, that I'd love to hear their comments as well. But I pride ourselves, at least within this district, about being transparent and welcoming family members or citizens, even if they don't have children in our schools, to give us input, because I think that's what makes us a great district, that we can have discourse and open discussion and transparency. So that would just be my food for thought for the future of not only inviting professors, but perhaps maybe some subject matter experts in addition to our phenomenal teachers.
Mrs. Almond.
I agree with Dr. Calderon. I heard that we notified our parents about the book, and I think we do a better job of that than we do of the community members. So maybe there's a way we could share that information, maybe post it on our website. I don't know that it was or was not posted right on the front. And of course, that would require someone checking it often. And I have a question for Mr. Guard-Harold about the books being on the DOE approved list. When you have supplemental materials, do they have to approve them in any way through DOE, or do you have the discretion within your department?
Supplemental materials are not on the Department of Education bid list.
Thank you.
And same thing, I know it took me a little time to find the link for finding the form, and if we could possibly have that on the main page rather than an average person not knowing to search for instructional materials. That's kind of, it was a little difficult for me, and I was a teacher for 26 years with that. And I know that these standards are from the DOE, so we have to abide by the standards that come from our state. And I just want to let everybody know that it's important that if we do have issues with standards, then the way they are outlined, that it's important for us to voice our concerns as well to the Department of Education and share that with them, including us as well as anybody in the community, so we can see what we can do to bridge the gap and make sure that everything is being covered correctly. Also, when we're adopting a book, I think it's extremely important for teachers to not just use the book, but to make sure that they use it as a resource only and not go page by page, but to go ahead and use all the other resources that are available to them at all times. I know that the schools did have the books for at least 3 to 4 weeks, so I know that the teachers were looking at the books, and I've spoken to some teachers and community leaders about social studies, and even Googling information myself, I find, there's discrepancies, just like when, a story is changed from person to person, and world history doesn't, there are certain facts, but there's also certain things that have changed, and with, for example, the Ottoman Empire. We need to make sure that we all know, and as well as our teachers, know all the correct information, and that we get that across to everybody correctly. And just making sure that this all flows properly, and I'd like to thank you for helping us understand all this in the process with it, and the parents and the community leaders that have also voiced their concerns to share that with us as well. Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions also. There was a concern brought up by Mr. Kornman that there was some confusion about whether or not a committee existed or didn't exist, and I think that may have been in reference to some of the communication that we had earlier about the 10th grade world history book. Can you help clear up for us when committees are engaged and how that process works? Because I know there's a specific request that members of the community be able to sit on this particular, not this 6th grade adoption, but an adoption for the 10th grade world history book, and there is no committee currently for that. So can you kind of walk us through how that works, when those committees come in?
Sure. So at this point, we have the current 6th and 7th grade textbooks expire. Our contract with those vendors expires at the end of this academic year. The 10th grade textbook contract expires at the end of next year because of when we adopted those texts. And so at this point, we have not begun convening a committee for the 10th grade world history textbook. What typically happens is usually late summer, early fall, we start reaching out to we make a determination as to which textbooks are most in need of adoption from the core curriculum, and then we also start reaching out to administrators. We get some input from administrators to see what their impressions are, because we want to keep our teachers in the classroom teaching, and so we have them talk with their administrators and bring some information to us as we make our initial decisions, and then from that point we would make a determination as to whether or not a committee would form, and if so, then we would ask for school-based recommendations. And certainly we hear your requests to have some community members and some maybe outside experts on that committee as well.
Another question that I have is for all of the teachers and parents and folks who had an opportunity to review the book, as I was reading through the item, I didn't see any of them listed as a con, the lack of information about Islam, and yet that's the concern that's been presented here tonight. Are you aware of any teachers or parents who, through this process, expressed that specific concern?
Other than the objections that we've received, I've not received any other comments from teachers or community members related to there not being a chapter or content on Islam is not part of the 6th grade world history standards.
So do you suppose that's why the teachers didn't see that as a concern? I'm just trying to figure out why our teachers and our parents didn't see it as a concern, and so I'm just trying to get to the root of that.
Yes, I would suspect that that's their reason for not having concern, is because they know that that is content that's addressed in 10th grade.
Okay. And of course, that decision for that standard to then be picked up in 10th grade is not a decision that we make here. It's,
Right.
So whether or not we think that's smart or good, or whether or not that makes sense, is certainly, we can have those discussions, but that is what we're operating under, are those Florida standards that are adopted.
That's correct.
Okay. Board members, I have had considerable communication with members of the community, both email, phone call, in person, and some of you may have had those same communications. I think it's important that you know that back in January, I started dialogue with some folks who were very concerned about the balance of the way that world history is taught in our schools, and have been working with Dr. Griffin really diligently since January to try and get a time together to meet with some concerned folks, to have our staff be there, to walk through the process at a time when there isn't a flashpoint of an adoption of a book. And now here we are at an adoption, and we've, I think not through any fault of our own, have not been able to ever get those people to the table yet to have that detailed conversation. So I want you to know that that your staff has done, I believe, a yeoman's job of being available, being transparent, and trying to answer any questions and concerns that may be out there. It certainly doesn't eliminate the concerns, but do you want to speak to that at all? I feel like it's important, because we're not allowed to talk because of
Right.
sunshine. It makes it very difficult for you to understand know everything that's going on.
Yeah, board members, and not specific to this adoption, but certainly including this adoption, whenever we're going through any curriculum process, you remember some of the instructional changes that we made when Marzano came on board, whenever community has concerns. I mean, one of the first things that we always do, either myself and staff, or sometimes just staff, we try to work through what the concerns, we try to listen to figure out what the concerns are, and then explain what we do and what we do not have control over. And one of the most challenging conversations is what we do not have control over. There are certain standards that have to be taught, certain courses. Whether we agree or not, that is the law, and we have to follow the law. So our job is to find materials that do the very best job to teach those standards. But also, being a longtime teacher and principal, our teachers overall do a very, very good job of supplementing what needs to be supplemented, of following our very well-written instructional plans, which are updated on a regular basis, and just getting the public to understand all that goes on behind the scenes is very, very challenging. I'll also say this publicly. This board has no concerns when we have a challenge or something that we are not satisfied with that is in statute, or something that is sent down to us from the Florida Department of Education, of expressing our concerns. And we've done that over and over and over. So it goes down to my original statement. There are certain things we do not have control over. The things that we do have control over, I think we do a good job with.
This is Dr. Calderon.
Madam Chair, I think that really summarizes who we are as a board. We believe in local control. We are very frustrated as individuals and as a collective group when that local control is taken away from us. And I think it's great to educate the public of certain things that we don't have control over. Like, probably many people don't know we choose the textbooks only after DOE says this is what you must adopt. And, that ties our hands. But then the other thing that ties our hands, too, are standards. I think the most thing that we've been vocal about the last few years has been the testing. So maybe once we can put that aside, maybe this is another stand that we take vocally on a statewide basis, because I think we are zero focused, as we opened the meeting this morning, on doing what's right for our students. And when some of those decisions are taken away from us, and we know it perhaps is not in the best interest of students, we work within the law, thank you, Ms. Beeman, to make sure that we can deliver as constitutional officers what is right for our students and community here in Seminole County. So thank you, Dr. Griffin.
Madam Chair, Mr. Gard-Harold, one question. When do we have the preview night? Was that posted on our website? I'm just curious.
Yes, that was on February the 21st.
And do we usually post that on our website?
Yes, it was posted on the website and also posted at the school sites as flyers. So.
All right. Just making a suggestion, maybe for future, when we're adopting maybe a book, we could possibly have maybe a message go out to Skyward through an email to the parents and the community via media, just to let them know in case we have anybody that's concerned or would like to know or see what's up for adoption. Thank you.
That's a very good question. So are our textbook adoptions, or do those go out to the GITS list? When you're communicating, the email list, there's a group of people who've expressed concern, usually mayors, city councilmen, no. That might be a way to do that. That's a good idea. Very good idea. I think the conversation that, even when we've been in Tallahassee and waiting outside of legislators' offices, we've run into folks from around the state who are there to talk to their legislators about textbooks. They're very concerned about textbooks. And I think the thing that we as school boards are having trouble, for whatever reason, communicating is that the textbook is a symptom of the standard. If you want your textbooks to look differently, then the standards need to be different. And I think there's a way that we could probably work together with the community to help deliver that message. But right now, my fear is that there has an adversarial relationship has developed between the community and local school boards who adopt these textbooks. And for whatever reason, we seem to either be talking past one another. But that element of the textbook adoption process, we're the ones that are closest to the citizens that we serve. And when these standards are adopted in Tallahassee, generally folks, it's a long drive to Tallahassee. And so that closeness and that direct feedback from the community isn't typically felt as much. So maybe that's something, I think, Member Alman, that's a great idea, that as we start looking at what our priorities might be and for upcoming legislative sessions, maybe we need to have a discussion about standards in general.
And I think maybe the reason why we haven't been so emotive on it is because we're so fortunate. We're in the classrooms every day. And if I reflect back from when I was a student in a classroom, the only information the teacher had was the textbook. Now we have multimedia, we have different collaborative learning groups rather than desks in a row, and I just wish I could videotape every civics classroom I've been in across the county, because no two rooms look alike, and they are really truly teaching patriotism and what's great about this country, and it's not out of the I don't think I've ever seen the textbook open when I've walked through the classroom. So I have to give hats off to our phenomenal teachers who are bringing history to life and are doing so based on the standards that we must teach our students at the appropriate time.
And going along with that, I was able to go on the World History login site for instructors, and there was an extension of activities that the teachers could elaborate on, which fascinated me because, like you said, we don't just use, and hopefully they don't just use this book, and they use United Streaming and Brain Pop and all the wonderful CPOMs, all the great programs that we have out there. And looking with the World History Ancient Civilization login under instructors, it did go in depth and would allow the teacher to go in and further if students had questions that were in the realm of critical thinking questions that they need to go out of the box, and they could actually do that, which was nice.
Any more discussion, any more questions? All right, with a motion and a second on the floor, all those in favor? Signify.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So at this point, Mrs. Beeman, I guess I'm going to ask you to revisit where we are then with this adoption.
Certainly, the individuals that provided the objections will be addressed by the department. Actually, with my review of what is to happen, we will have a 30-day window where we can receive additional objections, and then we will have a public hearing regarding all timely received objections within 30 days of that expiration period. And the process will be provided to anyone that files an objection, and we will provide a notice for the public hearing for those individuals.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is new business, item 4A.
And I have a recommendation that the School Board of Seminole County approve the Evaluation Committee's ranking of firms for RFP 16170050P-C0 for financial advisor services and authorize staff to negotiate a contract with a top-ranked firm.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a
Madam
second? Yeah.
Chair, if I could, pursuant to Florida statute, section 112.3143, and to avoid even the appearance of a conflict, I'm abstaining from this vote as it may result in a special gain or loss for a relative of mine. Thank you for your understanding.
We have a motion and a second with Dr. Calderon abstaining. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. Is there any other public comment this evening? I know we already took public comment related to the item on the agenda, but if there's anyone else here this evening that would like to give any other comments to the board about any other items? I don't see anyone. All right.
And Madam Chair and board members, there's one item in the superintendent's report that I'm just excited that we're finally to this point, working collaboratively with the city of Sanford and looking at a property trade and opening and retrofitting an existing warehouse, the property at Mellonville and Celery. And I think the best news is that it's a win-win for the community because right now that's being used primarily as a parking lot. I think when there are ball games and it's just a field. And we will in the very near future see a field or two there with parking, fencing, and organized sports that our students will be participating in. So I think it's a boom for the whole area. So we're finally there. It only took about a year and a half, but we're there.
At all? That seems like longer.
It does. It probably was.
All right. We'll move on to board committee updates and comments. Dr. Calderon.
Just one quick comment and then a committee update if I could. I just wanted to give hats off to our entire facilities department for a great groundbreaking this morning at the new Millennium Middle School. I know we were all in attendance, and I talk about a game changer. Not only the fields in that community, but a new performing arts middle school I think would be brilliant. Last night, I represented this board on our insurance committee meeting and just wanted to again share with all of our teammates that we are striving for 5 this year to choose your wellness incentive points. We've got mailings to all of our teammates homes, talking about to earn the 5 points, to earn your wellness investment. Postcards will be going out later and posters in each of our schools. So on behalf of the entire insurance committee, just want to remind all of our employees that we want you well and wellness, and you've got until July 31st to get those 5 points. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Rahman.
Thank you. A number of the school board members attended the Casbury Rotary recognition for students in elementary and middle school for their artwork, and they were given a little token of appreciation certificate and a beautiful work on display in the Casbury Art House. Casbury Chamber of Commerce had their Promoting Prosperity Student Scholarship event, and as with every event that's public, the majority of us go to all these events, even though one of us typically reports it. But I'm very proud to be part of that chamber, and we did 2 scholarships in each of our 9 high schools. The Business Advisory Board has a deep dive process, and they've always had one group, and not everyone participated. And they wanted everyone to have an opportunity to do that, so they divided everyone equally into 2 groups. They're going to be doing a deep dive on Great Start and helping them with their funding, and they're also, or a funding plan, and they're also going to look at our recent rezoning as far as our communication piece and the process and offer any suggestions for improvement. The Employee of the Year celebration was awesome. Love the new venue. I'm serving on the invitation to negotiate for privatization of surplus. It's a very interesting process, and we're learning a lot. We're not done yet, but we'll be reporting soon, I'm sure. And then lastly, the Children's Cabinet had a group called Bikers Against Child Abuse, and they're bikers who have an interest in helping children. They take a year-long training, they have background checks, and they will show up en masse 24 hours a day if they're called with a child in a threatening situation. So it's a very good program, and that's my report. Thank you.
First, I had an opportunity last week to take a tour on the at the bus depot. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Kudos to everybody in the transportation department. I didn't realize what a huge operation we have, and that we're like ranked in the top 2 in the state of Florida on how we run our buses and how we save money and what we do in the whole transportation department. Julie Murphy and, oh my gosh, it just went blank. They were just fabulous. And we have 22 bays just in the Winter Springs location. And we go through like 6,000 gallons of diesel a day and like about 1,200 gallons of propane. And they rebuild our seats. They have a whole department for tires, for any kind of mechanical equipment. We make our own hydraulic hoses and steering equipment. I was there for like 3 or 4 hours. It was just amazing. So kudos to them. And if you want to check out their wonderful report, go to the Quality Link site and see how fabulous they're doing. Also, Dr. Griffin and I had an opportunity to go to Keith Elementary School and listen to their wonderful course program with the rings, strings, dings and things, and that was awesome. Oh, they were really, really good. A little packed in there, but they were fabulous. And I had an opportunity to go to the Eagle Scout dinner at Amway, and it wasn't just Orange County. There were Seminole County Eagle Scout groups there as well, from Boy Scouts all the way up, and we had a lot of officials that happened to be Eagle Scouts in the past, and they all stood, so it was a really neat event there. ePathways Internship Expo, kudos to Dr. Wysong. We all loved it. It was amazing, and the reports back from the children, the students, they got a lot out of it, and I also spoke to some of the businesses, and they were really happy with what they received from that. And I had an opportunity to go into one of the life career development classes, which of course we'd love to see everywhere, at Lake Brantley, and speak about our jobs and what we do every day. So that was neat. And Mrs. Winterstein's class, she's a guidance counselor there. And then lastly, I was just going to say that, I forgot my Calno meeting, Longwood Beautification Project, they're doing this whole renovation in Longwood with a park, and they have the pieces of the senator, and they have a tree in place of it that is going to be just like the senator, and it's growing rapidly, so anybody can see that and take a look at that. And then April 26th, Holocaust survivor, Mr. Gene Klein will be at Lake Brantley High School from 5 until 8 p.m., and they're going to be talking about his survival in the concentration camp and his experiences with that, and go over any kind of hate or anti-Semitism and things like that. So that will be at Lake Brantley, and the L'Chaim Club is doing that. Thanks.
I'll just say Dr. Griffin and I attended Mayors and Managers today, and Becky Miller, I was going to say Miller. Becky Miller was one of the presenters today for a Gift for Teaching, and she really did a tremendous job in trying to get the cities to have some sort of a competition, I guess, among one another for donating items for Gift for Teaching, and so she was very well received and did a wonderful job. The other presenter was Sheriff Lima and Ernest Hamilton from Kids House. Some very important information was shared, and I'll ask Dr. Griffin to individually meet with each of you and see in what ways we might be able to think about reaching out to help them in the future. Certainly they service an unfortunate but much needed service in our community, and so many of our students and families are affected. So he'll be able to share all that with you. Of course, this afternoon, our favorite meeting is with our leadership students from our high schools. Right. And loved getting to hear from all of them about their ideas for making our schools and our community safer. And it's amazing how many things they said, and we all looked at each other and went, oh my gosh, that they were either right on target, thinking right on track, or had really come up with some great things that we hadn't even thought of before. So kudos to those students and to their leaders, their sponsors at the schools, for taking those projects on. They do a tremendous job. If there is nothing else that you'd like to share with us, we'll call this meeting adjourned.